Alright, so you've got your scene set up, you have already storyboarded out a couple of potential shots, but you want to spice things up. You want some animation brought in. Well, I've got some good news for you. There are a lot of amazing sources of pre-made animation just to help you get started. Of course, the more advanced you get, you probably want to start making your own animations and things, but in general, as a great starting point, there is this website called Mixamo, and it has a pretty solid library of pre-made characters, which then you can associate with some different animations. So out of this library list, there are several pages of these. Do not pick the same guy. I have purposely picked this totally ridiculous guy in hopes that you will not copy me, as many of you did copy me in the first tutorial almost entirely. So do not copy me on this. Do not grab this guy. Grab someone else. You do need an Adobe subscription to use the Mixamo website. So if you do not pay for an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, maybe find a friend that has an account, or just try one of the other avenues I'm going to cover here in a second. But if you do have access to it, what you're going to want to do so you want to pick a character. So I want Abe, and you're going to want to download Abe in his default FBX format and T-pose. While that is downloading, I'm going to take a look at some of these animations. You may find that you need to reload the page. I have to reload the page fairly often on Mixamo, I find. But once these animations are playing, that's when we know it's working. And all you have to do is you can just click on these different animations, and it will immediately associate it with this rigged character. So you can have some fun making your characters do totally ridiculous things. And if you want to have your own character even, you can upload your own character model, and it will attempt to automatically rig it to this Mixamo skeleton. So potentially that's an avenue if you want to make your own thing. I'm going to find an animation for walking, though. Let's just find a nice generic walking animation for Abe. That looks pretty solid. So you can play a little bit with some of these settings. If you increase this character arm space, it'll widen out the stride. That actually looks pretty funny, so I'll do it. But you can have some fun with the speed and the frame length and everything. For what we're doing right now, you may not want this in place checked, but depending on how you're going to use this animation, you may actually really want this in place to be checked. Because what the in place does is it locks the character's position, and then you will manually animate the distance it goes. This is really handy because if you want to stitch together a longer walk than just this single version, you'll want it to be looping perfectly in place so that you can just have it continue to play and you can have the character walk a longer distance. So I'm going to download the in-place version. Once I have that, I'm just going to hit the download, and I'm going to pick all of these settings. You can increase the frame rate if you're going to do a higher frame rate, but I keep mine at 30 frames per second, and we're just going to roll with that. Make sure it's an FBX, and say with skin, and then you hit download. While my character is downloading, I'm just going to really quickly make a new folder for characters. And this is where my character is going to go. Before it's even finished downloading, I'm actually just going to go ahead and drag the character model in itself. So to do so, you just find the file on your computer and you can drag it in. It's really key to have a few of these options activated, so just be aware that you absolutely want, remember this is just the base character mesh, but you want it to be a skeletal mesh. You want to import the mesh and keep this geometry and skinning weights activated. The other thing you want to make sure is on is create new materials. These should probably be the default settings, but we'll just hit import all. You'll see that this has populated the folder with a number of textures, a material, and a character mesh, as well as a skeleton. The skeleton, if you're familiar with animation at all, is essentially the bone structure of the character, and this is really what is being animated whenever you see an animation. So for example, this is the left hand thumb bone, and if I was to rotate this, you now would see exactly what's happening. It is moving the thumb, and so an animation is really just a collection of these different subtle movements that are keyframed out together. And if you were to go to something like the left shoulder and rotate, you'll notice that all the bones below that are considered children of that and rotate accordingly. So the practice of animation is really about learning how to properly manipulate these different components in the skeleton. But now that we have the skeleton generated and in the scene, I have downloaded my animation. I'm going to drag the animation into the same folder as my character. You don't have to do it this way, but I highly recommend doing it because when you do that, it automatically detects the skeleton that is present and associates the animation with this skeleton. This is super important because you will see that the Unreal Engine skeleton is already in this project just because we have the Unreal Engine mannequin character. But we do not want our animation to be associated with this skeleton because it has a different bone structure, and so the animations will not work with it. So we want to make sure we have this skeleton selected, and make sure you check this box that says import animations. Now it is loaded, and you see that there are some additional assets dropped into the scene. I'm just going to swap back to a default viewport, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this one in. You'll notice that all of these are in T-pose except for this one. I'm going to drag this one into the scene, which now we can see our character here alive and well, Mr. Abe. And if I want to play through his animation, I can just scrub through this bar. What's really nice about working this way is actually you can start to think of each frame of the animation as a different pose, right? If you were to screenshot this out, you have him frozen in time at this position. So you could have some fun with that in your compositions and even in your storyboarding, just trying to figure out, where do I want this guy positioned? I was thinking that I really want him to be in my shot that's going to be longer, and I want to have him a shot of him walking against the light. So I am already thinking about the kind of shot I want to create with him. I'm going to have him come from behind this pillar, actually. I think that'll be even better. I'm going to start him behind this pillar and have him walk across this space slowly. I think that'll be a nice shot with this dramatic backlighting. So I'm just going to leave him here to start, and it's super important when you see these asterisks next to assets, that means they are not saved. Make sure you hit the Save All button and Save Selected. So similar to grabbing a character from Mixamo, you can also just find characters and assets that are pre-animated. And this is just on Sketchfab. I just checked the animated checkbox here, and it will only show now assets that are animated. So you'll find things like this robot drone, which will have this animation playing. He's kind of swinging back and forth. Or this really nice turtle, which you could maybe have flying through your scene, for example. Another great source of animations is actually the Epic Marketplace. It has several of these kind of character models, even animals that are rigged and ready to go with some pre-made animations as well. Things like this 3D scan people pack, unfortunately, these are not fully animated, or they will only have like a couple of animations associated with them, so they're maybe not that useful. The really nice thing about this Mixamo setup is this immense library of animations available, which can really help the concepting and video work process. In general, though, any of these sources are totally legit. This next clip is just a really quick exercise in importing a custom animation, which is actually just made with a fast fabric blender simulation. So what I did to bring in this fabric animation from Blender, for example, is I had to import it as an Alembic file and swap it to a geometry cache. Once you have that in, you can actually just drag it into the scene, and here you now see in its options it has some playback settings. And I'm just going to quickly grab a material to put onto this fabric. And I'm going to rotate it here. And now if we want to watch it, we can hit the play button, and it will actually just play that fabric animation looping over and over. Similarly, it will play in camera as well, but it works slightly different from some of the other animations, so just be aware of that. And since I went ahead and made this, I'll just have it playing in the scene, I suppose.